You're listening and watching Rashkin Report. This is Yuri Rashkin. As you may have noticed, this program streams from Wisconsin. And Wisconsin is really, really an interesting state that I think people don't even really talk enough about. So we're going to try to kind of do it some justice, but also try to look at the lessons that we can figure out here for what's going on today in other states. And to do that, I am really, 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 really excited to be joined by former Democratic state lawmaker, legislator, Andy Jorgensen. Andy, thank you.
Thank you for having me, Yuri. Great to be here.
Awesome. Let's look at this because Wisconsin, we have had this privilege, I don't know if that's the right word, to have seen a lot of the things that are happening on state level, for instance, in Texas, where people's voting rights are being curbed. We've seen this in Wisconsin. We've been through this with Scott Walker. Scott Walker, of course, right now is trying to get the point across that, this was great. He did great things for Wisconsin. I mean, he still is defending his legacy. Unfortunately, he gets pretty big spaces to do that in, I think, like New York Times or Washington Post, but nonetheless, he was a significant figure and he turned the state in a different direction than we were moving before. How do you, filibuster, for instance? Let's take a look at that. You've experienced filibuster, actually being involved in a filibuster during Act 10. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. First of all, I've been out of politics for, going on 6 years now. I was a state legislator, one of 99 here in Wisconsin. In Wisconsin, we have what we call the Assembly, our Congress, if you will. And I was one of those. And I did that for about 10 years. I was in leadership. I was a caucus chairperson for those 10 years. And so I was in the middle of a lot of the debates. The one you're talking about is Act 10. Act 10 is something that happened soon after Scott Walker became our governor. And when he became our governor, he got all of the houses, both the Assembly and the Senate, to be Republican. So in other words, for supporters of the Republicans in Wisconsin, they were going to get everything they wanted. And one of the things they wanted to do was to strip union bargaining rights away from public employees, from people who work in a courthouse, to people who pick up the trash in a courthouse, to school teachers. They were no longer going to be able to bargain as they had in the past with their employer on things like wages and benefits and working conditions. And this was a big thing. And he was going to do it basically in a few days' time. And so you're talking about a filibuster. In Wisconsin, we don't per se have what we call as a filibuster. But what you're referring to is we were on the floor of the Assembly debating Act 10 and the things he wanted to do, the Republicans wanted to do, for over 60 hours straight. You may say, well, that's impossible. There's no way someone could stay up that long. Well, you can continue a debate. You can have a presence on the Assembly floor to keep it going, so to speak, and keep that debate alive within the rules. While we were doing that, you were mentioning Texas. In Texas, they have lawmakers that have gone off away from the state, so they didn't have a quorum, I believe, in their Senate, and they're not able, or I should say, I think it may be their assembly there, but they aren't able to have a quorum, and they're leaving the state because they can't vote without a quorum, having the right amount of people present to be able to take a vote. So they are gone, and they are unable to vote in Texas. And the governor has said that he's going to arrest them when they come back. And there, if you remember, Yuri, that was the talk back when our senators, and that one I do know, we had senators leave our state, Democratic senators. They went to, some people say fled. I don't really like that word. They left our state and went to Illinois, and the Republicans were unable to pass Act 10 in the Senate until they returned. And so a lot of this is something I'm very familiar with. As we look at Texas, they went to Washington, D.C. as a part of a strategy to be able to make their case, to go to Washington to plead with those lawmakers in Washington to get them to do some voting rights legislation. There are a couple of bills that are just, aren't going anywhere at this time. In the
But, just Andy, just to update, as of August 19th, Texas Democrats return, ending a 38-day holdout that blocked a voting bill. That's
Right.
what I'm trying to figure out. In the end, you can't live forever outside. You can't filibuster forever. But is there a point to these kinds of gestures?
Well, I think there is, Yuri. I think it is a part of the system as we have it, because by filibustering, by taking up a lot of time to debate an issue, raises the attention level of people, that are worried about soccer practice or going to work. They'll pay attention when they hear that a body has come to a halt on an issue. They'll want to learn more. At least as a lawmaker, and having a 60-hour debate, being a part of one, that was our hope. Was that by doing so, you were bringing people in something that was so broken that you wanted people to pay attention to what was going on in the Wisconsin State Assembly so that they would take your side, was your hope on how it would go. But yes, that is a part of a democracy, the ability to be able to do that. And you raise attention to what you're doing. I mean, there's a famous movie, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and that's what he does. He is just basically reading from a dictionary, some people do, to filibuster. That's making no argument at all, other than trying to make you pay attention as a regular person to see what's going on, check it out, learn more, and go, oh my gosh, that's not right. I've got to call my senator. I've got to call my assembly person. I've got to call my governor and say, this is wrong, because that's the hope of a filibuster. Now, a filibuster, as we know it in the Senate, that's not what a filibuster is there. There, the minority can say, we're going to filibuster. And by doing so, you've got to, instead of having 51 votes in a body of 100, you now have to have 60 to pass that bill. That, I don't think, accomplishes what I just described the filibuster is. That doesn't raise any attention. It just stops what was going to happen by a majority, a simple majority, and now has created a huge obstacle to pretty much, as we know it, just shut something down. We're not going to be able to get it done this time. Oh, shucks. Let's move on, hopefully, to the next issue. Maybe the minority will not filibuster, and we can see if we can vote on that. That's different. So, as we look at what's going on in Washington, is maybe the theme of your show today, Yuri, is the word filibuster. There's a lot of different ways that I've heard to modify what we know as the filibuster. And again, there's some real important legislation that hangs in the balance for the next election, especially voting reforms, for the next election, that would be something that would go across the board and was in America instead of done state by state. So we'd have, in some people's minds, a level playing field, a better understanding as to what's expected to vote and how you vote and who's able to vote and when and that kind of thing. Some real common sense things, but rarely do we ever see them debate these things out anymore. And we don't get, and because you don't see that, you don't get the chance to learn more about it and to really understand what is going on, because there's too much reliance, and this is a whole different issue, a whole different show probably, but watching our news sources tell us what's going on and hearing it with their slant, their point of view, depending on which team you, and I hate to state to say it that way, that you root for when it comes to politics. That's where you're going to learn more about some of these issues that are happening in Washington. When really, wouldn't it be great if we could just watch a debate from time to time, and it would be an actual debate of a making a point and then responding to it, and and having a talk. I think that would be awesome, and I think that's the way it once was. but it's not anymore. And I think we've lost a lot by that. But yeah, the filibuster is something that has got to be taken a look at. And in order to change it, there are some Democratic senators that have to come around to be able to do it. To abolish it altogether, the filibuster, that is one option, but I don't think it's viable from what I know about how, what's the reality of it actually happening. But to maybe instead of 60 senators having to be a part of the filibuster, maybe it's only 55, or changing that number. There's nothing in our Constitution that says anything about what the rules of a filibuster are. It's just the rules of that House, and they can discuss them and change them at any time. And I would hope that that would be something that would be able to come around, because we certainly have got work to do when it comes to integrity of our elections and making sure that some nefarious things don't happen. Because, and we always hear this, Yuri, the next election is the most important election of our lifetimes. I believe in less than 2 years, it is going to be that.
A lot. And you mentioned that. I'm just sitting here taking notes. But one thing that got me really curious, though, is role that labor also plays in all of this, because Wisconsin has a proud labor history, and so many cities, towns named Union in Wisconsin, and unions have been really rolled back. Like you said, the bargaining, they're really it reshaped union movement in Wisconsin quite substantially. And now it's looking at doing the same. Potentially, if this For the People Act is not passed, then the rights of unions are getting curbed and so forth. And labor is trying to pressure President Biden. Do you think it's fair to pressure Democratic president and to be like not happy with him and to question his policies, if you know that you're going to most likely vote for him anyway? How do you look at that?
Well, there's a lot of you rolled a lot of stuff in there, but let me just say that that's what our democracy is all about. Because you're a Democrat doesn't mean you can't be critical of what your Democratic leadership, whether it be as president or in the Senate or even your local school board member, is doing. That's just because they're on your side, but there are people that think that way. That is something that I've seen more and more of, but that's not the way I'm built. But of course, you can be at odds with someone who says that, or you supported to get elected, and now they're in there. And on this one issue, you want them to see things differently. There's a lot going on when it comes to unions. Unions, believe it or not, Yuri, was an issue way back when that was very bipartisan. It had Republican and Democratic support. It was something that both sides believed in, because it was standing up for the working woman and man, and all you're getting is just a seat at the table. You have the right to be able to meet on a regular basis to talk about things, not to get what you want automatically, but really simple, to be able to have a seat at the table to, yes, talk about your wages, to talk about benefits that you may or may not have, but also working conditions and in safety, especially. Unions really were born in the coal mines years and years ago. About, people were dying at age 30 as that was because of all the things that they were breathing in a coal mine. And these were brought up because of labor unions insisting that we as your workers have some things to say. And I come from a union. I come from UAW Local 95, which is the United Auto Workers. We used to have a plant in Janesville. And Yuri, that was a big part of our community, our society, our way of life. You had people that I worked with that couldn't read or write, never graduated high school, but had a really good job, had some money in their pockets to live the American dream. When's the last time you heard that term be used? But that was a good thing. It wasn't a good thing just for those people that work there, but for the diner down the street, for the grocery store on the south side of town. Was
And
able
Andy,
to.
let's not diminish your part. You had your own law that was passed, the project that you authored, bill that you authored, that I believe became law as far as union education.
Uh, yes, teaching labor history in the classroom, collective bargaining in the classroom. And my thought on that was, not to indoctrinate our children into, supporting unions, but I want to be able to, here's that word again, debate issues like being able to join and start a union. And in order for that to happen, you have to know what collective bargaining is. You have to know where labor has been, what it has done. You don't have to agree with it, but in order to have a good talk about this issue, you have to know a few things. And in Wisconsin, especially, a lot of things when it came to labor history happened right here in the Badger State. Things like the 8-hour workday were fought here. In Milwaukee, people died for an 8-hour workday. A governor made the call to shoot to kill for the National Guard to break up the crowd that was forming in trying to get an 8-hour workday. Think of that. That's just things we cannot forget. They're so important that they need to be intertwined in our curriculum when it's time in our schools. And I did get that bill passed, and I'm very proud of that. And guess what? I did it on a bipartisan basis. An issue like that, I was able to get passed. It was an interesting story, and I'll tell it here if you don't mind, now that you brought it up. But it was my first bill that I had signed into law by then Governor Doyle. We as Democrats, we were in full control. We had a Democratic governor in both houses were in control democratically, and I was a part of it. This was in my second term in the state assembly, and this bill had been around a while. And I'm coming from labor. I said, "Hey, I'll take that one," and I got to tell you, there were some Democrats that just didn't understand or didn't want to be a part of Democrats. I said of getting this done. They didn't want to put a mandate on our schools in telling them what to do. And I can kind of understand that. But I had some really interesting discussions with those folks. And then I brought it to the floor of the assembly. It got scheduled, and the Republicans, and one of them was she became a state senator. She also ran against Tammy Baldwin for United States Senator. Her name was Leah Vukmir. She stood up, and she was the one that was going to try and amend my bill. Now, she was doing it, and I truly believe this, to try to amend it, to say, and what I mean amend it, she means she wanted to change it. But sometimes people say that that's what they want to do, but that means they just want to vote no. And because you didn't accept their amendment, well, then that's why I'm going to vote it down, and you're going to do it without me. And so I had every expectation in the beginning that this was going to be nothing but just Democrats voting for this, and that was that. But she stood up and she wanted to amend my bill, and she didn't like it that it was I was mandating that schools had to have this as part of their curriculum. And I have to give her some credit. I think she was getting too cute by half, but she said, unless the author is interested in doing something different where this isn't a true mandate, I'm going to have to vote no. And so with some urgence of my Democratic colleagues, I stood up and said, if we actually change this, and I consider your amendment, your changes, and we do this, will you vote for my bill? Now, this is where I truly believe she never thought this was going to happen. She didn't think that someone was going to actually take her seriously. And I did. And I think that threw her off. And she looked at me and said, yes, I will vote for your bill. And so what we did, long story short, we shut down the whole assembly as to the proceedings, because we now had to go and figure this bill out. So her and I, we stood informal for some times. Standing informal is a term used for The proceedings have come to a halt for whatever reason. In this case, a bill was getting changed off in the corner, her and I, and we changed it that this bill would be on the standardized tests that teachers would give at the end of a school year. There are certain things that each class, grade class has to have as a part of what is being taught. This was going to be added to it. And so in other words, for her point, it wasn't going to be mandated, but it was going to be in there for my point that there was going to be certain questions that would have to be hammered out as to what they were. And I was a part of that process too. That was a whole different day. But to be able to integrate labor history in the classroom and to also teach what collective bargaining actually is. And so that was a part of a standardized test that each class or, school system was given that they would have to teach to. And so I was happy. She was happy. This bill on teaching labor history in the classroom was now supported by Leah Bookmere and a bunch of other Republicans that voted for it too, and it was a bipartisan bill that passed and is still law today.
What is it? And thank you to you for doing it, because I think it is important, very important. And my question is, can you clarify what is in this law as far as history? Does it require? Is it part of the curriculum? Can you just be? I'm really curious on that for my next question.
Well, it's things that have happened in Wisconsin that are noteworthy. The Bayview massacre, when it comes to the 8-hour workday, the story about that how that happened here, unemployment insurance, things like that was also born in the great state of Wisconsin. That happened here. And that came from negotiating with your employer. These are all things that have come, but also to collectively bargain. How does that happen? Who are the people that bargain on behalf of the employees? How do they get elected? And they do. It is a democracy within a workplace. You often hear this term, it's by the far right, union bosses. There are no union bosses. These are people that are elected to the positions, the leadership positions they hold. We have elections on the shop floor. We did in the Janesville GM plant. And those people were elected. That would be like calling our president a political boss. No one calls him that. He's elected, or she is elected to that position. But that is part of the rhetoric. When you're against something, those key words, they know that people don't like, and that's what they say. But so again,
what I'm actually thinking of. This is correct me if I'm totally off, whatever. I'm thinking of this really new popular term on the right called critical race theory.
Sure.
And I thought they're so concerned about stuff being taught in schools. And here you are promoting a good thing and, making it and getting it to be made into law and teaching something and just in general requiring schools. Do you want to touch, kind of talk about that one? Do we want to save it for another program?
Well, you're right to bring it up in what we're talking about here. Absolutely. I think that most people that are arguing against the critical race theory, first of all, I want every mom and dad to check and see if their son or daughter is being taught any of this in high school or middle school or elementary school. You're probably going to find the answer is no. But I think there has to be a discussion as to what is being taught, what's not being taught. For instance, I think just recently, a lot of people, and myself included, have learned about the Tulsa massacres. I didn't know anything about that. That was something that was intentionally left out of the discussion as part of our history. It was a horrible moment in time, but something that shouldn't be shelved like that. We need to talk things out like that and know that it was there and hopefully learn from it and hopefully that it will never happen again. That's what we're talking about here. But this critical race theory, I believe that a lot of people who are out, slamming their fist down on this and very, very upset about it probably don't even really understand what it is they're even arguing.
I can have a hard time really grasping it myself, to be honest, but it seemed like this was a kind of a similar topic. It is kind of just so odd that people have a problem with facts and history being discussed. and it, so little is mandatory. So much of this left to choices of individuals for now, thank goodness. So, I mean, it's we shall see. But Andy, this is great. Another thing that I think really started in Wisconsin, I want to touch on before we are done today, is occupation of the Capitol. Remember Occupy Capitol? Of course, you remember Occupy Capitol, and there was people who were at the Capitol for what, weeks, I think, until they changed something. And to compare that to what we saw in Washington, D.C. on January 6th, when we saw again like invasion of the Capitol. And on some cynical level, you can say, well, what's the difference? And in fact, Scott Walker, I think, made the comparison in a favorable light for him. But it's how do you see these? Was this to me? Those are two very different events that
They are.
Yeah,
I mean, they're not even comparable. One was to stop stop something from happening. They thought for the process to continue for Joe Biden to become our next president. What happened in Wisconsin? Yes, you're right. There were tens of thousands of people that were surrounding the Capitol for what seemed like weeks. I believe it was also actually occupying the Capitol. In this case, because they were upset that there was rights being taken away without them being able to be heard. What happened during that occupation, if you will, was the Republicans wanted this to be done within a matter of a few days, and they didn't want to hear what people had to say about taking away union rights from public workers. So they wanted it to be done quick. People heard this, and from all over Wisconsin especially, but all over the Midwest and the United States made their way to the Wisconsin State Capitol for their voice to be heard. It's in our DNA as humans, Yuri, that we know we're not going to always get our way. No one ever is. But if you're going to go and do something, you're going to take something away from me, in this case, that I've had for generations, and you are just within a blink of an eye, and you don't want to hear what I have to say, I am going to have a problem with that. And most people in Wisconsin are going to have a problem with that. They want to know where it is where this is coming from. They want to hear what you are going to say too. But the Republicans weren't talking on that. They just wanted to do it because, well, they could. And so people came and they protested peacefully. Nobody died, nobody got hurt. I think there were some who wanted an outbreak to happen, but it never did, because these were truly people that were teachers, snowplow drivers, janitors, and they were people that were working men and women that just were going, what is going on here?
Let me ask you this, Andy, let me ask you this. As you're kind of telling the story, I'm remembering, because I was there myself a few times at that time, and the respect with which really both the protesters and police, Capitol Police, were treating each other there. In fact, Chief of Capitol Police had Beloit roots and Rock County roots.
Charlie Tubbs.
Right. So there's all this, it was very, until people started getting arrested for singing, I think it was pretty genial. And you look at what happened again, January 6th, and how differently and violently it went, and how it was from the people who were saying that they support the police. And here you have these liberals up in the Capitol who are supposed to be like, 10 years ago before defund the police, but liberals, ooh, and they're actually getting along with cops, and cops are getting along with them. Like, how does that dynamic work?
Well, you're taking me back to those days, and the police had the respect of the people. The people were giving the respect. The beef wasn't with the police. And the police, as far as they could see, didn't see anybody nefariously doing damage or anything to the Capitol building or doing anything that was breaking the law. That I'm aware of. And so you had this mutual respect. People were there for why you would come to a state capitol. That is the people's house. It is meant for you to come to and to get involved and to get your voice heard. And because Act 10 was going through at a breakneck speed where that wasn't being accomplished, people were coming to the Capitol and in some cases staying there, and the police were just doing their job. And because nobody was there for any nefarious reasons, things didn't go as they did in our nation's capital on January 6th, where there was an insurrection happening, an overthrow of our government, a stoppage, if you will, of our Constitution, of what was supposed to happen, and death threats and things like that. Of course, it went a whole different route.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about the damages that the protesters were, I think governor was trying to say that the Capitol was damaged by the protesters, wasn't it?
And that was a farce too. And the people, the firm that he brought in there, remember, they actually did more damage, bleaching things. And, I remember there was splotches all over the floor from some of the things that were supposed to be cleaned. Was actually, there was that was an argument that wasn't there. That was something that was trying to be blown out of proportion. It was a talking point he hoped he had and didn't get.
All right. Well, since we're looking at history, I just kind of remember a couple of names. David and Charles Koch brothers, who played such a pivotal role in this. It was, I think, the first time in quite some time, where state seemingly was purchased by, a business enterprise. And since then, David Koch has passed on, and Charles Koch has changed his mind, has been saying that he regrets a lot of these things, and he feels like it sent things down the wrong path. And it's so nice of him to say these things now.
Yeah. Well, I think you bring up the Koch brothers. There's also another outfit that it's called ALEC. And it's American Legislative Exchange Council.
Yeah.
And I want to just touch on this because I think as people watch what's going on, and not only in Wisconsin, because we have a Democratic governor, it's not happening here like it is in other states where they're all Republican, both the legislature and the governorship. But, you notice things like, wait a minute, what's going on here is the exact same thing going on in Tennessee or in Texas or in Florida. How does that happen? Well, these corporations have gotten the ear through campaign donations and things like that, making these councils, making the Koch brothers, being involved in politics as they were or are. They would push the same agenda in all of these states. And their hope was to get them in all 50 states. I know it was. And that's why things do look a lot alike throughout states. And that, to me, is concerning, because what happens here in Wisconsin shouldn't really mirror what's happening word for word, punctuation included, as to what's happening in another state. Think about it. As I said in the beginning of this talk, I was a part of a body that had 99 members. And that many people coming to the Capitol in Wisconsin, in this case, you could possibly have, 99 different opinions on any given subject. And rarely you do, because of partisan politics. And so now you see it happening. What's happening in Wisconsin happens in this state and this state. And that is something that people should keep an eye on.
Because this makes sense, I think, from the corporation's point of view, because these are national corporations. They do business in all of these states. They have the same problems, so to say, that they're trying to address with their own legislation. So why make it different? It's been checked, vetted, everything works. So you just find your next friendliest legislator and you push. It seems like it's a streamlined process, and they've gotten actually a lot done with it. But again, it's happened in Wisconsin. We've seen it.
Yeah. It's very concerning. I like organic ideas. I like ideas that come from my constituents. That's the way it's supposed to work. Then I bring them up to the Capitol, and with those 99 or 98 other colleagues, I make my case to see if I can build consensus, and then together we see if we can't pass a bill in our house, then the next house, and then get signed by the governorship. That is how it's supposed to work, or at least that's the way I believe it should work. These national agenda ideas, some of them are very concerning as to what the goal is, and it's one that doesn't rarely ever does fit the state that it is being sold to. But because it's part of an agenda, a political agenda, also supported with contributions and whatnot. That's the reason it's there. Let's not try and kid ourselves.
Andy, it's just it amazes me because I think it was Bob LaFollette who said that states are laboratories of democracy, I think. But the idea that there's 50 states, there's 50 different approaches, but they actually being driven to have more and more of the same approach. One of the things, another thing that maybe last thing is gerrymandering. That is something else that we've seen in 2010. There was a story I heard from about Speaker, I think he's Speaker Robin Vos, that he was making plans, and he made since then, and he was correct, like expansion to his office to make it 2-story because he knew that he was going to be around for a long time. And, just this, cynicism of it. Okay, fine. But what, and it's spreading. Now, here's the catch. You have states that are controlled by Democrats who are putting their decisions on redistricting in fair position, in fair committees, nonpartisan committees, and therefore are sometimes losing. And so, like, net positive, this is for Republicans who are refusing to do anything about the problem because it benefits them. So, like, how do you see this whole thing?
Well, gerrymandering is something that, first of all, it can get very hard to understand. It's basically it's supposed to be where the voters pick their legislators, not the legislators picking the voters. And, we're running out of time, but that's basically what we do here in Wisconsin. But they do it in other states in reverse, where the Democrats are in charge. They gerrymander in reverse.
But Illinois, you have actually experience with this, because you weren't you redistricted out of your district?
My district, my original district that I first won, went through redistricting, or the political wood chipper. And I had to decide which part of the district that I once had I was going to stay in, and I had to move and all of that. And it was an interesting time in my life and my family's life. We actually had to uproot and move and go with the part of the district we felt was best. But we're doing it again. But this time we have a Democratic governor, one that is going to stand in the way, hopefully, of
you mean redistricting, right? Not you moving.
Yes. We didn't have that last time. It was Scott Walker who was part of it. Right. And of course, he wasn't going to stand in the way of that. But we do have Tony Evers in our case, and so we'll see what happens in this next round. It should be really kicking in here any day now.
Yep. Well, Andy, I look forward to continuing this conversation. I think that there is just so much that we can kind of just discuss that I look forward to continuing this. Thank you for being here. You've been listening and watching Rashkin Report. Remember to subscribe, hit like, share. Wisconsin, we are the center of the universe. Thanks for watching. Until